fate of the universe lies on your shoulders. Now, whatever you do, don't push this button. Because that will set off the bomb immediately, and we'll all be dead. Now, repeat back what I just said.
I am Groot.
No! No, that's the button that will kill everyone. Try again.
I am Groot.
Mm-hmm.
I am Groot.
Uh-huh.
I'm Groot.
No!
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. The time has finally come to review the sequel to most people's favourite Marvel movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. However, I'm not in that group of people. Don't get me wrong, I thought the first Guardians was good, but it didn't amaze me, so my hype for the sequel is maybe not as much as the average viewer. But I'm never going to say no to watching this group of great characters because I don't think I could live without topping up my dose of Drax and Rocket now and again. So, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2
something good? Something bad? Bit of both?
Well, to answer that, I'll be delving into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, dance your way down to the cinema and give it a look. As normal with sequels, I'm not going to talk about the main characters again because we all know them by now. Drax is just as literal, Peter is just as egotistical, Gamora is just as resting bitch face, Rocket is just as difficult and aggressive, and Groot is just that little bit cuter this time. It's pretty much your standard fare as far as the main characters go. So I'll talk about our two new characters, Ego Quill, yes that's right, Ego, it couldn't be any more literal if Drax said it, and Mantis. I'll start with Ego. He's sort of a difficult one in some sense. Like, I really hate him. I hate his motivation, if I even understand what it was. I hate his face, I hate him as a villain, and I just hate his character. Not only that, but I just don't think he really fit into the movie at all. He did up until he said, "That's why I gave your mother that tumour." That was just a bit too far, I think. I just felt so detached from him there and then. I sort of wanted Peter's dad to be more tragic, like he had to leave Earth and never return for some reason. Not because he was afraid he'd become, you know, a nice guy, so he decided to give the missus a brain tumour and fuck off to Legoland in his spaceship, the cunt. But that's how he's also interesting. By making him so monumentally disappointing, you end up sharing that feeling with Peter himself. I'm sure my good friend over at Geeky Glasses TV will know all about the feeling of disappointment with his father, but for me, it was new. So while I didn't like his character, in fact I hated him, I did like that the film put you in Peter's shoes. I've never really experienced that before in a Marvel movie. As for Mantis, is there really a point to her other than to be used as the catalyst for Drax's character development? She seems more like a huge plot device than an actual character. She's enjoyable, don't get me wrong, she's bubbly and lively and very sweet, but I can't help but think the film wouldn't lose too much without her. She doesn't offer much to the group and I hope she plays a much bigger role in Volume 3. She has potential, but it wasn't really realised in this movie. So the answer to my initial question is a resounding bit of both. Since we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, if I had to express the majority of this review via music, it would be this.
There's just so many things that I can't touch, I'm torn. I'm a lead of faith. This is how I feel. I'm cold and I am shamed, lying naked on the floor.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was surprisingly character driven and I'm not sure it quite manages to pull it off for me. The intro is really strong with Baby Groot dancing as the Guardians are engaged battling a giant space octopus, but then once Peter's dad shows up it all goes to shit. The film slows right down and I was left watching for about an hour with little to no plot development. No villain emerges, there's not really any battles and the group is split up. I miss their camaraderie. I just thought for a good hour of the film it was monumentally dull. It felt like I was at a Radiohead concert. However, there is some touching moments with the character-driven story. Peter finding his father and then realising that he had a father all along in Yondu, Rocket realising he's not truly alone because he and Yondu were basically the same, Yondu realising he's made the same mistakes as Rocket by being greedy and throwing away his family, Drax moving on from his wife by starting to fall in love with Mantis, Gamora sympathising with Nebula and allowing herself to love Peter. There was lots of character development in Guardians 2, but it just all happened in the dullest way possible. I also think that part of the reason it doesn't quite work for me is because of the tone. Guardians is known for being very out there in terms of the wider MCU. It's very colourful, full of crazy and strange creatures, and has batshit crazy set pieces. The Guardians themselves have a very specific sense of humour, so to have this kind of comedic and childish tone woven into a character piece doesn't quite mesh well in my opinion. Take a look at Logan. That was a character piece, but it was very solemn and serious in tone. Yeah, it had its comedy moments here and there, but it wasn't balls to the walls action or childish humour. In Guardians 2, one second you have a powerful moment where Yondu regrets all of his life decisions and warns Rocket not to make the same mistakes, the next you have Drax saying he has famous turds. I just don't think it works. However, I applaud James Gunn and Marvel Studios for taking a massive risk in making Guardians 2 a character piece. They could have easily just copied the usual Marvel formula and everyone would be happy, myself included. I would have loved another Guardians one, but I can totally understand why they changed it up and I appreciate their ambition. It just didn't quite work for me. That said, I did love the ending. Once we found out Peter's dad is a bit of a twat, the movie begins to pick up again. The end battle wasn't anything amazing, but it was certainly welcomed after the slow middle. The group are back together again and we get to see them kick ass as a team. This was the Guardians of the Galaxy I wanted to see. The scene with Rocket teaching Groot how to use the bomb was hilarious. Seeing Star-Lord zip about the place, smacking his dad all hour like he'd just been told he's not getting a SNES for Christmas was brilliant. It finally was Guardians of the Galaxy. But when the battle ends is where the film really changed for me. Yeah, I thought most of the second act was dull. I thought the end battle was good, but not great. I was going to give it 3 frames out of 5 max, but then the movie just ends on this really solemn and touching note. It brings together all of the character development and just weaves the group together with it. Star-Lord loses Yondu and realises he's loved them all along and he embraces his new family, the Guardians. Gamora puts her arm around him as they look out at Yondu's funeral. Drax cradles baby Groot as he longingly looks at Mantis, mirroring his past. Not before he savagely calls her beautiful, but on the inside, which was fucking hilarious by the way. But then the most powerful moment comes when we see Rocket, normally very sarcastic and cynical, looking out at the stars just all quiet. The movie ends on a great shot of Rocket just looking very remorseful. He realises that even though Yondu was a selfish arsehole who was an outcast like he is, he could still be heroic and die so selflessly to save his family. That last shot just shows you how Rocket is thinking about how he could change, and he almost looks ashamed of himself. Now I love Rocket, he's such a fun character and I wouldn't really want him to change, but that last moment before the credits gave me chills. It was totally unexpected, but it made total sense, and I love that James Gunn and Marvel had the balls to suggest that kind of character development. This is why I think this movie is a bit of both. While I think the second act is incredibly dull, the ending wouldn't be anywhere near as powerful without it. The ending really brings the movie all together. I left the theatre feeling so conflicted about it, and that's a good thing for a film to do. If a film can keep you thinking about it well after you've seen it, then it's a good movie. Unless of course you're thinking about it for all the wrong reasons. Looking at you, Jason Bourne. I touched on it earlier, but I really loved Yondu and Nebula's individual stories. It was clear from Guardians 1 that these two characters needed a redemption arc, and Guardians 2 delivers both brilliantly. Yondu was exiled from the Ravagers and eventually his own crew form a mutiny against him. He deciphers that he's the common denominator there and finally realises he's a selfish prick, and betters himself by freeing Peter of his arsehole dad by sacrificing himself. It was great to see that he actually cared for Peter all along and wasn't just an overgrown smurf who went through a punk phase. Watching him and Rocket bond was great too, even if it was relatively brief. I didn't care much for Yondu in the first movie, but I knew he had potential, and I'm glad the second made me care for him before he sacrificed himself, otherwise it would have lost so much impact. Similarly for Nebula, it's clear to see that in the first movie she's just the product of an abusive childhood. Not only that, but she's the second best beaten child. It's never good to have a shit dad, a trait a few of these characters seem to share, but it's even worse to be the child he loves a little less. It's perfectly understandable that she would hate Gamora, I mean she's jealous, I get that, but the movie then makes it so that her motivation is about just having a sister, which I thought was wonderful. We all know she doesn't really want to kill her and we see that when she has the chance and doesn't take it, but I thought she may still hate her in some form but they'd unite over their mutual desire to destroy Thanos, and that's how their relationship would develop. Instead, it was great to see her just come clean and reveal to Gamora that she just wants her to be her sister, to love her for what she is and not constantly fight her. This eventually led to that wonderful moment at the end where Gamora just hugs her and says, "You'll always be my sister." I really love that. Again, this plays into the slow middle but powerful ending. Yondu and Nebula both have excellent redemption arcs and I'm so glad James Gunn pulled them both off so well. In terms of comedy, I'd have to say that Drax was a highlight. I'm very glad that the movie didn't rely too much on the Baby Groot fandom. I've never really understood that. I mean, yeah, he's cute, but that's it. He's cute. The intro was a bit fanservice-y in that regard, and after watching Rogue One I've had enough fanservice to last me several fucking lifetimes, but I'm happy that they used Baby Groot effectively. I enjoyed him. Drax absolutely steals the show with some of his one-liners though, like when he calls Mantis beautiful on the inside, how he tries to kill the octopus from the inside, and some of his loud belly laughs. However, some of those were a little overused and forced. It seemed for the first hour of the movie every single scene had at least one moment where Drax belly laughed, and it got a little old after a while. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There were moments in the movie where the comedy was as forced as this joke, but I think overall it remains a funny movie. It's not often that a movie can make me genuinely laugh as opposed to slightly blowing air out of my nose, so it must be doing something right. From a technical standpoint, I think the pacing could have done with some work. The movie felt way too long, which could be blamed by the boring second act, but some scenes just seemed to run on a little too long too. The gimmick where Groot was trying to fetch Yondu's prototype Mohican from the captain's drawer was funny for the first 3 attempts, but it just went on and on. Unless something is absolutely hilarious, it's always good to stick to the rule of 3. 3 jokes about one thing, then move on. 3 attempts, then continue. Say your point 3 times to get it across. And while I enjoyed it, I also thought the end battle was dragged out a little too long too. I expect a Guardians movie to be quick and snappy, and Guardians 2 just wasn't that at all, again because of its character-driven plot. Is it just me who thought the soundtrack was weak too? I mean, the first movie had hits like Hooked on a Feeling, Spirit in the Sky and I Want You Back. Volume 2 just doesn't even come close to the same kind of quality tracks. I mean, it has Mr. Blue Sky, The Chain and Surrender, but the rest of the tracks are just weak. Volume 1 was pretty much great across the board. I also thought the music was used better in Guardians 1. Guardians 2 had some good moments with The Chain, but the rest of the music just wasn't implemented very well. I would have loved a Star Trek Beyond-esque scene where they just destroy a fleet of ships with music, but that would be straight up copying and I'd have to hate it for being unoriginal, but I'd secretly love it. Guardians 2 does continue to look beautiful though. It brings across the wonderful vibrant colour palette of the first and has great special effects to back them up. There's some really great cinematography in Guardians 2 as well. Seeing Drax cuddle baby Groot as Mantis stands in front of him was a nice shot. Seeing him and her look over Ego's planet was nice too, and the last shot on Rocket was powerful. From a visual perspective, Guardians 2 is just as strong as the first. So ultimately, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is much less Blue Suede and more Sam Cooke. It's slower, it's a little bit less interesting in terms of plot, and it doesn't quite hit all the right notes for me. Peter's dad is a monumental disappointment, which is both good and bad. Mantis is a plot device for Drax. The character-driven plot makes the movie relatively uneventful, but the ending brings it all together in such a powerful way you can almost forgive it. Drax is on his A-game and is bolstered by an equally solid main roster, with Yondu and Nebula having the redemption arcs I knew they deserved. The movie goes on a little too long and could be drastically cut down. Its soundtrack is disappointing in comparison to the first, but the spectacular visuals still make it an enjoyable movie. I can't even say if you're a fan of the first you'll like this, or if you aren't a fan of the first you'll like this. It's one of those movies that really is down to the individual. My friends are pretty much split 50-50 on this one, regardless of what they thought of the first. It's such a divisive movie that has definitely sparked discussion, and that's a good thing. It's great to see that James Gunn and Marvel have taken a risk and tried to push Guardians into some unfamiliar territory for the MCU. Off the back of this ambition, I can't wait to see Guardians 3, but for me, Guardians 2 just missed the mark. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 gets a very bit of both, 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.